I'm curious to hear about something you mentioned briefly in your presentation, value transmission, and how that's still important to the families of no faith that you spoke with. I wonder, do you see or does your research indicate a difference between passing along good values to children versus raising them in a community of faith? Or were they very similar?
Yeah, there was a lot of similarity in terms of value transmission. And so both sets of parents, the parents who were not religious at all and the parents who were very much thinking about how do we hand down these values and these views of the world that we really agree with and want our children to have. Now, the difference tended to come in the communities of faith had a more ready structure for being able to do that. And so they, obviously they could draw on their religious communities for the formal instruction, for a community of other people who shared the same values, for an opportunity to filter children into friendship groups that they also felt confident had at least somewhat similar values, or the parents seem to have similar values. They also were better able to kind of draw on the congregations to produce discussions with their children about values. So the parents who didn't have that structure just had to do it more ad hoc, had to do it in a different way. And so maybe there were people in their lives that they valued. And so they would have dinners with them to talk about the things that were good, or they would talk to their children and say, well, maybe this other friend of ours could also be a mentor to you. If you don't feel comfortable talking to me, you can talk to this other person. And they trusted that person, but they had to put together that framework. And so that was one of the, I think, important differences, is that the parents who were already embedded in a religious community just had more of these things that they could draw on, and they could draw on as much or as little as they wanted to,
Mhm.
and kind of go from there. So that's what we saw in terms of the difference with regards to those two different groups.
Yeah, thank you, and it's so interesting to hear you talk about folks who don't have that religious community finding other trusted adults to kind of pull into the village as mentors. We talk a lot about mentorship in the church and how very important that is, and it sounds like folks with no faith tradition are also sort of finding the importance of that and trying to cobble it together themselves, which is that's really interesting to hear that it sort of passes through, regardless of religious tradition or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Jill.
Yeah.
It seems like there's an opportunity there, especially for parents that have children.
Yeah.
That I mean, if all of our parents, and we didn't find any who weren't trying in some way to very consciously, pass on values and pass on beliefs, it would
Mhm.
seem that religious organizations, if they could align, and many of them do align with more secular values, that would be an interesting opportunity to pull those parents in.
Yeah,
um
absolutely. Yeah, thank you.